President Trump has been back in the White House for over a month, and his actions and policies have certainly made a significant impact on the global stage. Most notably, has completely reversed US foreign policy regarding Western and democratic allies. While China has been identified as a major focus of US foreign policy, it remains unclear what Trump's broader strategy toward the country will entail. So far, the administration has introduced additional tariffs on Chinese imports, imposed further restrictions on PRC related investments, and pursued a high profile case involving TikTok. However, beyond these actions, it's unclear what Trump 2.0's grand vision for China might look like. On a related note, does Trump have a clear policy on Taiwan? Today, to further discuss this, we speak to Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, the ranking member of the Select Committee on the CCP. On February 28th, the whole world witnessed the collapse of a deal that was meant to lead to peace between Ukraine and Russia. Many people watched in disbelief the US demands of Ukraine. President Trump said to Ukraine's President Zelenskyy, "You have no cars, you need to be thankful, and you need to be respectful." And what followed was this fierce defense by Trump's national security advisor and Secretary of State, condemning Zelenskyy. This swift change of political winds in DC towards Ukraine worries pro democracy allies from Europe to Taiwan. And then we saw a major announcement by Taiwan's crown jewel, TSMC, that it will invest $100 billion in the US over the next 4 years. What are your thoughts? Should Taiwan be worried?
I think everybody should be worried. Unfortunately, this is a source of concern, not just for our friends, partners, and allies, but for Americans. Because what happened was it appeared that we took the side of a dictatorship over a freedom loving democracy. And that makes us all less safe because it emboldens dictators like Putin or authoritarian rulers like Xi Jinping to basically potentially attack sovereign countries or other places and know that the United States may not have their back. And so I feel like this was a moment where we showed weakness. And when you show weakness, it invites aggression. And that could invite aggression by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, against Taiwan. It could invite aggression in the South China Sea. And as a consequence, I feel that what happened edges us closer to a potential conflict in the world.
So you are worried that this will invite more aggression from Beijing towards Taiwan rather than perhaps Beijing seeing this as an opportunity to exploit and want to negotiate with Trump, because we know Trump loves negotiations.
Well, I think they might do both. I think that they see this as an opportunity to test just how far the U.S. is willing to go in turning its back on friends, partners, and allies. And then secondly, I do think that they are looking to negotiate a number of issues with Trump, everything from tariffs to potentially Taiwan to human rights to fentanyl to everything. We need to compartmentalize. We, the US, we don't want a situation where we are basically, getting played and we basically have to sell out on our principles or our partners.
You've said at a recent event that Trump's negotiation with China cannot put Taiwan on the table. What does that mean? What makes you worry about this possibility?
The concern is that Trump is willing to negotiate at any cost. And when you think of at any cost, that could be at the cost of our friends, partners, and allies. That could be at the cost of other countries' national security. And so that is what people like me are concerned about with regard to Trump's negotiating style.
So, what can be done now that we know President Trump has this preference for negotiation? What do you think Trump really wants from Taiwan, and how can Taiwan be better prepared to make sure it's still a democracy and it has security?
Well, I think that TSMC, making that announcement was no coincidence. I think that they probably understand that it's probably better to show the Trump administration the value of not only TSMC, but Taiwan and its sovereignty. and it's the need to preserve its self governance. And so the more that Taiwan talks about, for instance, buying more goods from places like Illinois, my home state, or other places in the US, the more that they are talking about making sure that our trade balance is in a better place relative to now, I think that will all be appealing to the Trump administration. All that being said, from my standpoint, I still think that it's in our best interests to do the right thing, which is to deter aggression. If you don't deter aggression, you're going to invite conflict. You're going to invite open hostility. So I personally think that we have to do whatever we can to help Taiwan's deterrence. But I think Taiwan should keep in mind that Trump has a slightly different calculus with regard to the situation.
Well, clearly, China is a big part of this triangular relationship. And you've also said that the US China relationship needs to be in the right place. And what is the right place for you?
Well, I think the right place is a more stable place. Right now, it doesn't feel stable. I feel that whether it's on economics or whether it's with regard to security matters or technology matters, I feel that there is a certain instability in the relationship. You can see this in terms of the tariff talks, right? You can see this in terms of what we're seeing with regard to the PLA and its exercises, whether it's off Taiwan or in the South China Sea. These are not normal. This is not normal. And so we need to get to a better place.
And so, what will be the select committee's priorities for this Congress?
Well, I think that we have to continue with building up our deterrence. That's extremely important. And that means helping with Taiwan's deterrence posture, but also our own in the Indo Pacific. I think that we should focus very much on the economic competition. And while there's a lot of talk about tariffs, we also need to talk about our competitiveness. And that means making sure that we invest in our own competitiveness. We also fix our legal immigration system, which unfortunately now poses too many barriers to retaining and attracting the very best and brightest scientists, researchers, entrepreneurs, and others to help America prosper. And we also have to upskill our own indigenous workforce in technologies of the future, whether it's AI or quantum, whether it's nanoscale computing. We need to make sure that our indigenous workforce is prepared to take jobs of the future in these areas.
Well, what are some of the hearings that will be held in this congressional session?
A number of issues, including Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon, which were operations that the Chinese Communist Party pursued that are very, very disturbing. The Salt Typhoon hack is one of the most kind of major hacks of any private telecom providers in my memory. It basically exposes vulnerabilities that we have to fix. If we don't fix them, we're going to be subject to more and more hacks and attacks from the CCP.
There are cybersecurity issues, and you also mentioned the technology competition issues, which I think has been some of the major, I would say, topics that your select committee has been focused on over the last few years. Um, how do you look at the technology competition between U.S. and China? What is really the best approach to address this concern that China might be moving ahead when it comes to competitiveness?
I think that's where we have to invest in ourselves, Wenchi. I think that we can't, it's not enough to just hope that your competitor is going to do less well than they're doing. You have to invest in yourself. You have to build up your own muscles. You have to do your own kind of fitness regimen to get ready for the race. And we're not doing enough of that. We don't train enough of our own indigenous scientists. We haven't fixed our legal immigration system so that we can, attract the best and the brightest from around the world. We haven't invested enough in technologies of the future. Just as an example, researchers from Stanford came to my office the other day and talked about how without foundational research money from the federal government, they won't be able to continue with the groundbreaking research that they're making, whether it's in robotics or whether it's with regard to AI or semiconductor manufacturing. None of that is possible without that foundational research money that the federal government provides.
During the Biden administration, there are a lot of export control related policies. And are you anticipating more coming from the Trump administration? And if so, how would you respond to that?
My hope is that the Trump administration is going to build on what Biden has done. And I'm hopeful that they do so in somewhat of a bipartisan manner. But the proof is in the pudding, and we'll have to see how they actually conduct themselves. I don't know for sure. But people like Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, and others have been in Congress, so they know the importance of keeping this bipartisan.
Well, but it seems that they've been very much aligned with President Trump's position, just looking at Ukraine, which is also what worries Taiwan, even though when they were in Congress, they were staunch supporters for Taiwan.
I think that it's very important that my good friends in Taiwan make their presence felt, make their presence known, that they increase their tempo of kind of outreach, and that they do a lot of this outreach to their friends on both sides of the aisle, and sooner rather than later.
That's really good advice. Well, last question. Do you think the US is undergoing a grand strategy shift? Some people say this cozying up to Russia is almost like a reverse Kissinger and Nixon moment.
Yeah, I think that I've heard about this reverse Kissinger moment. I think that whatever it is, I think it looks dangerous to me. In general, I think it's good to kind of grow closer to your friends, partners, and allies, and keep your adversaries at a distance. Hopefully, someday your adversaries change, and then you can kind of engage them more. But we're not at that point right now, and Putin, especially, is nobody to underestimate. And my concern is that when you push away your friends, partners, and allies, like we're doing right now, we're pushing away Zelenskyy, pushing away Europe, not doing what we have to do with regard to Taiwan. It just invites aggression, and that's a big problem.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
Thank you, Wenchi.
This has been a special episode of Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more stories from TaiwanPlus News, follow us on social media. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Game on! Taiwan's national team takes the field, ready to conquer the World Baseball Classic qualifiers. Meanwhile, CPBL spring training is in full swing, with teams gearing up for an electrifying season.
当然新目标就是希望自己的身体可以保持健康，这是非常重要的。
On the court, the stakes are higher than ever as basketball heads into its dramatic final stages.
抢投一个大后三分，林志杰接受。
Athletes across the island are prepared to give their all in 2025. This is the moment. Game on Taiwan.
三分炮。